Hey there, folks. Welcome back to the Playbook. Today, we're diving into the exciting world of fantasy football as we gear up for the 2023 draft season. We've got all the juicy details you need, rankings, expert advice, a peek at the promising rookies, and some savvy draft strategies to help you dominate your league. So grab your favorite snack, kick back, and let's get ready to crush it in fantasy football this year. Now, we all know how the NFL offseason can feel like a game of musical chairs for our favorite players. Aaron Rodgers, DeAndre Hopkins, Darren Waller, just to name a few, are shuffling around the league like they're in a dance-off. But hold on to your helmets, because did you know that almost 40% of an NFL roster gets a makeover every single season? It's like a reality TV show out there. So, as we gear up for the 2023 fantasy football drafts, having some rock-solid rankings is like having the ultimate playbook. Players like Devin Singletary, Jacoby Myers, and Deontay Foreman, who were all fantasy darlings last year, have packed their bags for new teams. It's like they're pulling a LeBron James in the fantasy world. So, stick around for some 2023 fantasy football advice, because we're about to spill the beans on how these new locations might just make or break your fantasy season. Whether you're on the hunt for a trusty fantasy football top 150 or you're diving deep into position-specific 2023 fantasy football rankings to uncover those hidden gems, sleepers, and potential busts, you gotta check out the 2023 Fantasy Football Draft Bible over at Sportsline. This treasure trove of wisdom is brought to you by none other than the dynamic trio of fantasy experts Jacob Gibbs, Dan Schneider, and RJ White. Gibbs, our resident data wizard, practically had a crystal ball when he called Patrick Mahomes' epic 2018 season. He's all about that data-driven approach, which has earned him a reputation as one of the sharpest fantasy rankings in the nation. Heck, he's been in the top 10 for accuracy over the past 3 seasons according to Fantasy Pros. So, if you're a serious fantasy football player, the Bible is your secret weapon. It's like having the cheat codes to the fantasy football success. But wait, there's more. RJ White, Sportsline's numero uno NFL expert since 2017, started his fantasy journey at places like AOL Fanhouse and Fantasy Cafe before landing at CBS Sports. These guys are like the Avengers of fantasy football, with decades of combined experience that can give you a massive advantage in your league. So if you want to dominate your friends and coworkers in fantasy football this year, you better pay attention to what this dynamic trio has to say. The 2023 Fantasy Football Draft Bible is not your average guide. It's like having a treasure map to the fantasy football greatness. This ultimate guide not only dishes out the top 150 players in standard and PPR leagues, but spills the beans on must-see sleepers, breakouts, and potential busts. Plus, it's your VIP pass for rookie QBs, running backs, and wide receivers who could be the best next big thing. Now, folks, let's dive even deeper into the Fantasy Football Draft Bible and uncover some potential busts for the 2023 season. Buckle up, because this is where it gets interesting. First up, we've got Christian Kirk, the wide receiver extraordinaire now donning the Jacksonville Jaguars jersey. Last year, he had a career-best season with an eye-popping stat of 84 catches, 1,108 yards, and 8 touchdowns. But hold on to your helmets, because there's a twist. With Calvin Ridley's return to the mix, Kirk might find himself slipping down the pecking order. And those fancy advanced metrics from last year, Jacob Gibbs, our fantasy wizard, thinks they might just be a one-time wonder. I mean, come on, catching 63% of deep targets? That's like catching lightning in a bottle. Meanwhile, the rest of the Jags wide receivers were playing catch-up with a mere 30% catch rate. Let's talk about CeeDee Lamb, the shining star of the Dallas Cowboys. Last year, he soared to fantasy glory with a jaw-dropping 107 catches, 1,359 yards, and 9 touchdowns, finishing as the WR6. But Jacob Gibbs, our resident sage, has a crystal ball prediction. Dallas's offense might be just taking a step back in 2023, and that could mean trouble for Lamb. Does he think Lamb hit his fantasy peak in that explosive Cowboys offense and matched last year's numbers? Well, it's about as likely as finding a unicorn in your backyard. Jacob Gibbs also had concerns about the Dallas offense, and he's not holding back. In 2022, we witnessed what can only be described as an outlier season for the Cowboys. And despite all the fireworks, CeeDee Lamb only managed to snag 9 touchdowns. Now, here's the kicker. If Dallas settles down to the league average scoring rate in 2023, Gibbs thinks Lamb might have a tougher time crossing that magical 300 PPR point threshold. Let's talk about that coveted first draft slot, shall we? If you find yourself with the first pick in the draft, it's a no-brainer. Justin Jefferson is the guy you want. Period. He owned the throne as the top-scoring wide receiver in fantasy last season and ranks a solid 6th in overall scoring across his 3-year NFL career. Now, sure, we could toss Jamar Chase or the top 2 running backs, Christian McCaffrey and Austin Eckler, into the mix, but this pick is a perfect starting point to chat about your draft strategy. You see, this season, the top-tier running backs are a bit on the mature side compared to previous years. They didn't quite deliver the same per-game production we've seen in the past. When you're picking in the second round from the number 1 slot, here's some interesting food for thought. First off, consider this. The top 5 running backs this year are, on average, the oldest they've been since 2015. In that year, they collectively missed 31 games and saw their fantasy points per player drop by a whopping 102.2 compared to the previous season. Yep, even with the spectacular Adrian Peterson comeback story. On the flip side, this year's top 5 wide receivers are on fire. They averaged the second highest points per game in the previous season, trailing only the legendary 2015 crew of Antonio Brown, Demaryius Thomas, Dez Bryant, Odell Beckham Jr., and Julio Jones. 3 of those guys broke the 300-point barrier, and the group averaged a jaw-dropping 20 points per game. It was a wide receiver bonanza. So, here's where it gets interesting. In the second round pick 20 in a 10-team draft, or pick 24 in a 12-teamer, you have a shot at crafting a dream wide receiver combo with talents like Garrett Wilson, Jalen Waddle, T. Higgins, and Devonta Smith in a 10-team league. In 12 teams, you can snag Higgins, Smith, DK Metcalf, or Chris Olave. Now, the big question for a fantasy manager picking from the top slot is this. Do you embrace the 0 running back strategy and load up on wideouts? Or do you consider a running back either at this pick or your next one? Pick 21 in a 10-teamer or 25th in a 12-teamer to secure your RB1 spot. Otherwise, you're in for a wait until picks 40 and 48 respectively to grab your top running back. At that point, we're probably talking about players like Breece Hall, Dameon Pierce, or Miles Sanders. Now, let's navigate the draft waters from slot 2, where things start to get intriguing. In the first round, pick 2, you're at the crossroads of the RB versus WR dilemma. Christian McCaffrey and Austin Eckler might have that sweet PPR edge, but there's no ignoring the ticking age and wear and tear clock, especially for McCaffrey. It's a tempting spot for a running back, but I'm still not sold. No players are unlocked just yet. Fast forward to the second round, pick 19 in a 10-team or pick 23 in a 12-team league, and we're reminiscing about Le'Veon Bell's infamous holdout in 2018. But hold your horses. That odd scenario shouldn't immediately put a must-avoid label on Jonathan Taylor and Josh Jacobs. Sure, there's some risk involved, but they have plenty of time to sort things out well before week 1. These two are intriguing, high upside picks as you approach the end of the second round, as long as you're willing to take a little bit of a gamble. As we've journeyed through the first draft slots and contemplated various players' choices, one thing becomes abundantly clear. There's no one-size-fits-all playbook for success. You see, fantasy football is like a gourmet buffet of strategies, each dish tantalizingly unique. Do you go all in on wide receivers early, or do you secure an RB1 like a precious gem? Are you a risk taker willing to gamble on high upside players, or do you prefer the steady consistency of proven veterans? It's like choosing your adventure in a labyrinth of possibilities. So, my fellow fantasy football enthusiasts, embrace the chaos, savor the unpredictability, and remember that the beauty of this game lies in its infinite strategies.